Greetings, Alnadi viewers. I'm very happy to have today with me Dr. Nagar again and a new topic to discuss. Hi, Dr. Nagar.
Hi, I'm also happy to be back with all the Alnadi audience. Audience, always. Back to audience.
Yes. Okay, Dr. Nagar, before we say anything about what we will discuss, I'd like to remember uh, a very important story that happened with Darwish Khan. That is the concept of a concert, which means uh, people used not to present the music in a concert in Iran back then. Can you take us into that, please?
Sure. I think the name itself, which still doesn't have any Farsi word. I mean,
Mm,
still people say concert when you go to Iran and people want to go to a musical performance. It's very unnatural to replace that word with anything else. People are still using the
mm,
word concert, which they had
mm,
learned through the changes that came after the relationship with the West, which was new
mhm.
then. What happened with Darwish Khan? Ghulam Hussein Darwish was his name, the top tar player, composer, and a very important figure in the Persian Dastgah music for
Mhm,
still now. I mean, many of the compositions being performed in concerts, recording, and so on are his. Tasnifs, Pish
mhm.
Daromad's rings, and they even say that Pish Daromad in the modern sense was his reinvention to start these concerts, these
Mhm,
so-called public performances. The story with him is interesting in many senses. One
mm,
is that, of course, he was before he came to this situation where he would have public performances, which we call concerts today. He was a musician at a court
mhm.
himself. He was with one of the princes of Qajar dynasty, and he was a rebel, and he was
Mhm.
always going elsewhere doing other things, which made the prince very angry with him. Well, that's a long story people can read about later, but it already shows that he had enough of serving a court,
Mhm.
and he also had feelings for other people, of course. I mean, he was against this hierarchical system of
Yeah.
performing only for some special people and being divided from people who were probably like he himself. I'm not sure what kind of background as a family he came, if they were farmers or not, or craftsmen or not, I don't know. But uh, he was originally coming from that context where we didn't have concerts, so to speak, right? The music was either for the elite, performed in a private space for the prince, for the king, for the people around them, guests or so, or was a small group of friends and family or musician friends who would sit together and perform for another, or kind of show each other's compositions to one another, and so on.
Yeah.
But this coincided, I mean, Darwish Khan getting out of that framework of playing at a court coincided with something else in the history of Iran. And that was a
Mhm.
revolution called constitutional revolution. It was a monarchy, of course, but there were
Mhm.
a lot of people, even from the family of the king himself, who were kind of trying to limit the power of the king through making a parliament and bringing a constitution. And that's why they call it a constitutional revolution. And they
Mhm.
were fighting. The fight went really deep. I mean, they even fought with weapons and so on. And
Mhm.
they had taken parts of, if I'm not mistaken, Tabriz and parts of the north, if I'm not mistaken again. And then finally they came to Tehran. They kind of occupied Tehran, they say, and then the revolution was said to be successful. Within this change of the society, with the movements of people, a lot of other things change.
Mhm.
For example, Arif Ghazvini, who's another poet and one of the very famous composers of tasnifs in Persian
Yeah.
Dasgah music, he was the poet of those times, and he was with the constitutional revolution people.
Mm-hmm.
And many of these musician poets and so on, they had their own communities. They were sitting with one another, they would hear each other's work. And at
Mm-hmm.
the same time, there was a guy, Ali Zahiruddoleh was his name,
Mm-hmm.
and he had come from a Sufi background.
Mm-hmm.
He was at the same time the son-in-law of Nassereddin Shah Qajar, but he was with the constitutional revolutionaries.
Mm-hmm.
And he was really actively getting people together, first secretly and then officially, making a society of brotherhood, Anjuman
Mm-hmm.
Okhovat, they call it. And they
Mm-hmm.
had a lot of members here and there, both in Tehran and in other cities. And they were really socially active, like a, today you would call it a political party, but then it was not. They said we are not politically active, but there were
Mm-hmm.
many politicians in it.
Yeah.
uh, their mottos, their slogans were about humanity, brotherhood, and so on and so forth. But he was a very influential figure, and he was also doing a bit of music himself. So
Mm-hmm.
when Darwish Khan was introduced to this society, and he became a follower, he also, I think, he also joined the Sufi order, and he
Mm-hmm.
became very active. Then he became the head of the orchestra of this
Mm-hmm.
society. And then after a bit, when there were events which became public, like celebration of the success of this revolution and so on, and then some charity events as well, they
Mm-hmm.
performed in a big garden and
Mm-hmm.
allowed everybody to come in. I mean, they were selling tickets, but they used the money for making hospitals. I think I'm not sure about but it was charity. They were not paying
Yeah.
the musicians. They were collecting money to do other social work with. So the concerts, so to speak, the public performance of the music was taking shape in the framework of this social political change
Mm-hmm.
that was new for Iranians. And at the same time, of course, a lot of people from different social classes wanted to be seen equal. They didn't want to be
Mm-hmm.
peasants against the nobility or what. They want to be sharing the public places together. So it
Mm-hmm.
coincided somehow. And of course, it also brought in a lot of musical ideas. Darwish Khan is said to have composed Pish Daromad in a modern sense for such performances, because before that, it would be just like a small intro on
Mm-hmm.
a solo instrument before the singer starts singing, for example, like something like a small char mezrab, a little bit of metric piece that creates the mood or sets the mood for the
Yeah.
dastgah to come, and then the singer would start and so on. But then when you have a crowd coming, you really need the orchestra to play something together, which is preparing for the
Mm-hmm.
opening. And that's what they say Darwish Khan was seeing as a necessity, and then composed these pish daromats for this situation. So what he did was not a personal, I mean, he was the person who was seen for it, but there was a lot behind him to do that. It was continued, of course, with, there was a hotel in Tehran, Grand Hotel it was called, with
Mm-hmm.
performances at Grand Hotel. And that is famous later because of Qamarul Mulk Waziri, who performed for public there
Yeah.
in a hall in Grand Hotel. But yes, the story of Darwish Khan starting public performances is quite a social, political, unique example of how things can suddenly change phase, let's say.
Yes. Now, which years we are talking about, Dr. Nagar, just to put our audience into context. Yeah.
Yeah, the constitutional revolution was announced successful. I think the Farman, the order of the king, was signed in 1906. So it
Mm-hmm.
was like the dawn of the 20th century. The concerts, I think, were started a bit earlier
Mm-hmm.
and then continued. So if I'm not mistaken, I think I made a note somewhere that the performance, very famous by Qamar, was in 1924 in Grand Hotel.
Mm-hmm.
So we are talking about the first 30 years, I mean, starting around the beginning of 20th century and then going on for maybe 30, 40 years or so.
And that's for sure the time of flourishing gramophone and records and so on.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they were also recording. But one thing that was very interesting for me when
Mm.
I was following the story of Darwish Khan and public performance, I thought, okay, what happened with Ali Naqi Waziri, for example? He
Hmm.
was around the same time. Or a bit
Yes.
later, Sabo, Abul Hassan Sabo. There is no sign whatsoever. Nobody says a word about Sabo performing a concert, except
Hmm.
for, I think, one occasion, which was a school performance.
Hmm.
And previously in Waziri's school, he also prepared, I mean, in around the same time, the beginning of 20th century, Waziri started a musical school in Tehran. That was the first modern style school to learn music. And then in that
Interesting.
framework, he was also holding lectures, concerts, and so on to educate people for kind of sitting and listening to music. And I've read in his own writing that he also invited Darwish Khan, for example, to attend such events. In the orchestra there, Sabah was playing.
Mm.
And then later, when Sabo was given the directorship of a branch of the same school in Rasht, in the north of Iran, they also formed an ensemble there and they had concerts. But other than those occasions, I've never heard of Sabo doing a concert. He was
Mm.
either playing at the radio or
Mm.
privately at friends' houses. I mean, many of the recordings from Sabo are done either at the radio or in a private situation where there are some guests. Usually, there would be a rich person who had guests and then invited Sabo and Tehrani and a couple of top musicians to perform. Or there was this very important figure, Agha Mujarrad Tehrani. He was a very influential person who knew music, but he was like the anchor person of all the musicians, and his
Mm.
house was always like their gathering point.
Yeah.
That was a bit later, and they were also gathering there and doing music, meeting one another very often. So it's interesting that around the same time that the concerts started, and even later, maybe because radio also appeared and then
Hmm.
recordings as well, it's not like concerts were becoming the main situation to perform, even for the top musicians like Sabo.
Hmm.
I thought that was
Yeah.
also an important and
Interesting.
interesting thing
Yeah.
to see.
Actually, the question is if the norm is no concert, this means that music as a message or compositions or works of music are usually carried over by musicians to musicians or their friends and families or to the inviting parties, let's say the court or the elite, or isn't it? It means the message is carried over to somebody who understands it or appreciates it or close to it. Then it became a message to the public,
It's quite a change.
isn't it? Yeah, I mean, thanks for giving the other examples and really enlightening us for seeing the way music was carried over or communicated to others, which is a big change, right? Uh,
Absolutely.
that leads us to the question of what is the artist's role here with
Oof.
respect to his music?
Well, nowadays they don't have any role. They go where money goes. But
Yeah,
if we take that
yeah.
joke out, um, of course, the art of communicating,
Mm.
I think that is the core of any art. It's not just
Mm.
music. Uh, if you don't have anything to communicate, why take the effort? I mean, you might be a painter and you don't have the direct audience like the musician, right? But there's
Mm.
still something you want to put on that canvas, you want to put on that paper. There's something you
Mm.
want to get out of yourself on a medium.
Mhm.
Why do you do it? I think any artist might have asked themselves this question. Why
Yeah.
am I doing this? Is it just out of being bored? I don't think so. I mean, if you're bored, there are a lot of entertainments you can take, which are probably easier. So there must be a more forceful a need to get something out of your whole imagination, perception, whatever that lives in you, onto a medium, in my
Hmm.
opinion, in the hope that somebody
Yeah.
receives it and can connect with you
Hmm.
in one way or another. Uh, it could be seen as a uh, you have probably seen that in the old times in stories and movies was happening a lot, that somebody was lost in an island, or the ship was broken and they would end up somewhere else where nobody else was there, and then they would somehow put a message on a piece of paper, put it in a bottle, close it, and would hope that the sea or the ocean would kind of bring it to another shore, where
Hmm.
somebody else or some other people would read it and realize, oh, there is someone there. Let's go to
Hmm.
rescue that person, for example. A message in a bottle is a very famous expression because of that.
Yes.
And in my opinion, when you are taking the trouble to make something as a piece of art, whatever it is, whatever
Hmm.
medium you choose, there is something you want to communicate. You use that medium as a bottle to put the message in.
Hmm.
If the choice of the audience is yours, is another thing. If I can
Hmm.
sit with someone whom I have some common background, let's say Sabah sits with Tajbidi, or with Tehrani, or whoever you can, with Ruhollah Khaliqi, with Waziri, and there's a lot of such stories, by the way, beautifully written by Ruhollah Khaliqi in his book of Sargozasht Musiqi Iran, the story of the music of Iran, where he explains how Sabah the first time brought in his Deilamon, for example, or other
Hmm.
pieces that he had just composed, and played it on the violin for them. That was
Hmm.
a quite common way of expressing this message. He had discovered something. Sabo had
Yes.
found something which was a reflection of his imagination and inner world, let's say,
Yeah.
on the violin with some sort of music.
Hmm.
And then he wanted others to hear it. So I
Hmm.
think it's basically meant to be shared, but with whom you want to share it and with whom you can share it
Yes.
is bringing all these kinds of media. And
Exactly.
with concerts as it is today, I mean, these big venues with, I mean, the
Hmm.
top
Hmm.
busy pop rock star places like those, you don't have any choice of audience, right? You are just like a loudspeaker sending the message out, and the listeners would receive it or not, or maybe they are just there because they want to be their friends with their friends. You don't know. I mean,
Yeah.
it happens a lot with pop music. People go to a concert, which, by the
Hmm.
way, I had to laugh a lot about a couple of years ago, where I was working with a band, and I heard they constantly saying the word show, and they were not
Yes.
using the word concert. And then I thought a bit and said, come on, are you really changing these words intentionally? Because it's a difference, a big difference if it's a concert or if it's a show.
Yeah.
And I think with a lot of stuff which go in the so-called entertainment industry, it really
Yes.
is a show.
Hmm.
It's like you are entertaining some people with some attractive, interesting stuff.
Hmm.
But a concert, in my opinion at least, was not supposed to be so.
Yeah.
A concert was supposed to be a place which, a ritual for sharing this content would take place. Uh, Stop me whenever I'm going too fast
No,
or
no,
too much.
actually, Dr. Nagar, this idea of concert is really a very sensitive word nowadays, as you said, the thing about the show versus concert, except for jazz concert nowadays, they have included jazz into that. But anyways, if we go break down what you have said, which is very, very important, the artist, the painter, uses his medium that he is expert or she is expert at and investing their time learning the secrets, the techniques, the way they can put their inner world, I'll use your terminology, into a piece of work, right? And then share it with others. So they choose that because this is the best way they can communicate. They believe this is the best way they can communicate. Now, the message is going to be carried over and communicated from a sender to a receiver. And as you said in the story of Abul Hassan Sabah, what he chose to communicate, chose as work or maybe built to communicate to those who understands or maybe who can get inspired or maybe inspires back Abul Hassan Sabah for maybe more work and linking it back to the context of pre-concert in Iran or
Mhm.
everywhere else. I would assume this was the case where uh, the message is carried over to somebody who can understand it and appreciate it. Otherwise, we can dilute that message or be making it syllable. We can sell it, right? We can make it easily received or easily comprehend message. Taking over that principle, and going back to the artist or the musician, choosing what to say and inner word. This is very important because I could remember a composer, an Ottoman composer, very famous for sharkis and songs, Haji
Mhm.
Arif Bey.
Mhm.
So it is an individualized or personalized experience that he lived, for example, and that has reflected into these sharkis and composed songs that he is singing regardless if the sultan asked him to compose and he said, I'm not going to compose, I don't feel like it, I compose
Mhm.
when I like, and he puts him in a prison.
Mhm.
Okay, so all this is connected. What we write, what we build, what we communicate, and to whom,
Right.
isn't it?
Absolutely. It is.
Yeah.
It certainly is. If uh, I don't know if it's a good thing or is if it is the weak point of the whole process that
Hmm.
in order to have the carrier of your message
Hmm.
uh, capable of bringing the message you may want to. I mean,
Hmm.
if you see how the so-called artists are educated, you see a
Hmm.
lot of it is going or is spent on technique in
Yeah.
every right. Everybody learns a lot of. Let's forget for now what we mean by technique. Let's just take it as a whole. That a lot of
Mm.
people would spend a lot of time and effort, of course, to learn the technique, right?
Hmm.
Also the teachers are putting a lot of effort in teaching the learners how things are done, right?
Yeah.
And of course that's by itself very valuable. I mean, craftsmanship generally is a lot about
Mm.
technique, how you do something um, in a high standard, let's say. That's
Hmm.
one of the high achievements of human civilization, and through ages of evolution, we have come to some achievements. I hope we
Hmm.
have. I mean, with all the old calligraphy styles, painting styles, the way to deal with paper. I mean, if you look at it in the course of history, it's quite something. The same in
Mm.
instrument making. I mean, the very ancient instruments to play any music on were a lot more primitive. And if you
Mm.
follow the evolution of instruments, you can see that, for example, a violin is a fantastic instrument. That's
Mm.
why it's so capable of fitting into so many different music languages, music cultures generally, right?
Yeah.
So there is a part in any art which is about, let's call it
Hmm.
crafts,
Yes.
which brings in technique, right? But
Hmm.
if you just learn the technique and then information on top of that, let's say they tell you, the king orders you to compose something uh, in the language of Maraghi. I want a nobat murattab. That was one of the forms then.
Yeah.
In what and what on what poetry and in this ira, in this rhythmic cycle and so on. Of course, you are trained as Maraghi or a good musician of those times. You know all this, and you just have to take the effort to construct something
Yeah.
would fit the order. This is like a factory line.
Hmm.
The similar thing in Persian music. I mean, I've been a teacher at the university. I know it a lot. That the students are learning dastgah stuff. They also
Mm.
learn what a char mizrab is, what a pish daromad is, what a reng is, and so on. And when they want to graduate, one of the things they have to do is to compose a program.
Mm.
They sit down and write it. A char mizrab in dashti. This is the
Mm.
paye. They know all the shahed and stuff. They put together something,
Mm.
factory line. And
Yes.
of course, when the program is performed, in my opinion, the best you can compare it to is to these things that are created by AI.
Mm.
It's a collection or collage of the previously created stuff, which the learner has learned. And if they are
Hmm.
supposed to perform it, they have also learned how to perform it.
Hmm.
And then it's there. It suddenly is there on in front of you as the audience.
Yeah.
This technique thing is necessary, but the problem, in my opinion, problem is that it's supposed to be the means to another end, and that end, in my opinion, again, is supposed to be the so-called message. The message
Mm.
can be anything. I mean, it doesn't have to be one style or another. I mean, there are the
Yeah.
diversity of people's thinking is infinite, but it has to have something to express. Otherwise, it's like a robot.
Hmm. Yeah.
Even though you can be good at all the details of the technique, to put it together and to perform it, it's still like a robot at
Hmm.
best, right?
Yeah.
I mean, like a
Interesting.
very good AI, which
Hmm.
I'm sure you've heard, they some years ago they inaugurated a 10th symphony of Beethoven created by AI. And I've heard from people who went to the concert that it actually did sound like Beethoven, but after death, of course. I mean,
Yeah.
it had the characteristic qualities of Beethoven's compositions because AI had studied them very carefully and used all these idioms and whatnot and the rules of harmony in those compositions. You can do the same. I can try and copy Hossein Alizadeh in style. Fine. It's not me. It's a good
Mm.
as a study, a good thing as a study. I'm learning by copying. I'm learning what Alizadeh did, but there's no message of me in it.
Yes.
So back to the first thing is that I think with real creation of this communication, there
Hmm.
should be uh, what is usually called an artistic experience involved.
Yes.
The artistic experience is supposed to become of a collection of higher sensitivity to all the details of that um, whatever is created, like music in our case,
Hmm.
creating emotions, ideas, images, and reflections of many things in me and the audience, I mean, in the creator and the audience, uh, with which I think after the experience, the audience and the artist both should feel different.
Hmm.
Like I usually say, if I want to say if a concert was really a concert, I would check just the simplest equation for me is that I check if I felt different afterwards. I mean,
Yeah.
different in the sense that I was elevated. Because
Yes.
if the message, if the artistic experience is shared, if the real
Mm.
communication happened, it means that I felt something as the audience. I felt something that the artist had felt or thought. And as the performer, I also managed to tell someone what I had somehow felt before.
Hmm.
That's the communication, right? And
Yeah.
after this experience, there should be something different in our lives, in the
Hmm.
state of the moment. So if this
Yeah.
happens, then I know a concert was good
Hmm.
because this artistic experience to some level took place. But if I don't
Hmm.
feel different, nothing happened.
Hmm.
Even if everything was performed absolutely correctly, like the AI,
Yeah.
this communication didn't take place. And again, in my opinion, if this communication is really fulfilled, then it means I have expanded my territory of being.
Mm.
I grow.
Yeah.
And
Interesting.
this whole process seems to have been ignored by many.
Mm.
I don't know why. I don't know if it was the same before and it was being ignored by many before too. But in my limited experience of 30, 40 years that I was kind of half consciously from childhood till now, following
Mm.
uh,
Mm.
literature, music. I mean, I've been, thanks to my parents, I've been at concerts since a very early age. As
Mm.
soon as they would allow us in the concert hall,
Mm.
my parents would take us.
Mm.
So I've seen it. I've been there. I've been under the magic of this communication, and I know it. And I know
Mm.
that when you leave a good concert or a good movie, I mean, or a good exhibition of paintings, it's the same story. You
Yeah.
are a different person. You have grown up. You have grown bigger.
So
It's
you
different
carry an
from
experience with you out of that
absolutely,
place or
absolutely.
that piece of
And
work.
it's totally
Yeah.
different from being entertained.
Yes.
Being entertained in the sense of I just sit here and somebody does some acrobatics and so on, and I say, good.
They
That's
keep you
not,
hooked. They keep you hooked.
yeah. I don't
Yeah.
know if I answered your question or
No,
not, but
you
this,
did actually, and you are creating more questions. Basically, I'll go back to certain points you mentioned,
please.
where you said if people copy a certain musician, there is nothing in that piece from me. Okay, and always art and music has some sort of an artistic experience or an artistic ego in it. Okay, that's the driver for what we compose. This is what I felt. Now, the way the receiver can receive or maybe get some experience of my own work as an experience, it's a reflection, it's as a personalized way of receiving the way an artist created something by someone else. That's why you say the added value, the elevation, right?
Right.
So I think it's a
If
very
that's
important
correct,
component. Yeah.
yeah, but I have to add something to my to what I said before, in the sense that um, when you copy someone is one thing. When you perform somebody else's music can be another, in the sense that I can receive somebody else's composition. It creates some artistic experience in me, and then I want to reflect that artistic experience out again. I personally
Yes.
believe that expression, the freedom of expression, as they say, is a part of freedom of speech, right? Freedom
Yes.
of
Yes.
expression is supposed to be a basic human right, at least in my
Hmm.
opinion. And
Yeah.
uh, if I get inspired, that's what they call inspiration, right? If I get
Yes.
inspired by an artistic expression of somebody else, it's not just copying. I can
Hmm.
I can be an actress or
Hmm.
a director or a scenario writer. I
Hmm.
read somebody else's book. I put it into a play or a movie. Or as a musician, I get somebody else's composition and I perform it. But the point is, I'm not copying that.
Yes.
I'm giving it life from my own
Hmm.
experience. That
Yeah.
is something I thought was needed, a bit of a.
It is very important, and maybe to highlight that imitation or copying
Mhm.
is maybe a technique of learning. It's not the ultimate goal or target we need to reach. It's
Absolutely.
a medium of learning something,
Yeah.
right? But maybe I will use another word for carrying the meaning you were highlighting, which is the energy. There's
Hmm.
an energy that sometimes we feel through a gramophone of somebody who passed away decades ago,
Right.
right? Or maybe a piece of written music on paper, like the pieces written in Cantamir's time or whoever. And I read it, and all of a sudden that energy comes. It's a written piece. I mean, I couldn't even see a recording for it, but there is that energy of the composer, that energy of the record, of the improvisation. That's the thing. Maybe I called it artistic ego, or maybe it's better to call it energy,
Yeah,
isn't
that's
it,
a right
Dr.
word.
Nagar?
Yeah, yeah, I agree. There's an energy coming uh, if you are educated to, let's say, read it. I mean,
Yes.
if you are not educated, you will be only exposed to something. You will receive a bit of that energy. But
Mm,
the more educated you are, if you want to see a piece of paper with Cantamir's writing, and you get that energy, you really need to have had the education. That energy wouldn't
mm,
transmit if you didn't have the education to understand what's written. If I read poetry by Hafez, I'm just reading it on the paper, and then suddenly a world of meanings create here. I mean, it just
mm.
um, opens a globe over my head when I read those lines, and I say, "Wow." There are so
Yeah.
many lines by Hafez that are still like this for me after I don't know how many thousands of times of reading. But I needed the education to first of all read it, and then to some level of understanding get close to it, right?
Yes.
So that energy
Interesting.
is kind of on a spectrum where you it's like a radio. You're supposed to
Frequencies.
be possible to tune to receive that energy, but certainly there
And
is something like that.
and that's not automatic. It needs really an investment of effort of the receiver or the artist himself, right? To work on.
I think so. I
Yeah.
guess with music, there should be, they always talk about some basic human capabilities. Like
Hmm.
if you um, if you perceive a continuous pulsation just
Mm.
as a human being, it creates
Yeah.
something in you. There is
Yeah.
the perception, right? But the more complicated it becomes, the more education you need to receive
Hmm.
and interpret the message. But the basic ones are usually the ones that they use when they want to create songs for children.
Hmm.
It has a simple beat, it usually has a repetitive pattern, and so on. And with that, they are kind of making certain that the child is able to connect. And
Mm.
unfortunately, the music we hear a lot these days in
Mm.
public places, like in um, shopping malls here and there, it's an aggressive version of this. Like you
Yeah.
hear a boom, 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 as if something is really be beating on your head.
Mm.
To that level, I think the education is not needed. But anything higher than that, you would need to be able to follow, and
Mm.
then what to follow needs education too.
Maybe we need to be educated to avoid or stop.
That would be nice too.
Yeah. Dr. Nagar, you mentioned, I don't know why these generations are not really investing into this, what we call energy thing, like
Mhm.
discovering energy, receiving energy, or producing energy in compositions and playing and so on. It's a matter of training. If the teachers or the sources of education or whatever is teaching us how to execute something, how to produce something, because this is the concept of the business. I need to produce a product and deliver it to somebody who buys it, right?
Right.
So in this case, we are not investing or putting our energy or effort as a teacher or as an individual to learn how to create art, create eternal pieces, eternal music, eternal piece of art, isn't it?
Mhm.
This is something that rarely people say, What are you saying? This is bullshit." All
Mm.
what you need to do, these are the explicit knowledge pieces. It's explicit knowledge, nothing implicit,
Yeah.
right? No tacit knowledge. We will tell you what you need to know. This is the way it
Yeah.
works. This is the way you can work and make money.
That's it.
Basically, the direction has changed.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying, and a lot of images and actually some cute
Yeah.
moments come to
Mm.
mind. And if you don't mind, I will tell you and the audience one of those. I remember a couple of years ago at the University of Tehran, there was a sort of competition for ensemble performance. And the students of music that, from different universities could apply
Hmm.
to come as ensembles and perform a program. And there was a jury to evaluate them.
Hmm.
And I was among the jury. And then one of the ensembles who was from Danishgah Gilan were chosen as one of
Hmm.
the best three. We were actually thinking of them as the best, but we didn't
Hmm.
tell them. We said that, okay, there are three of you who are chosen as the best three. And what we can offer you as a prize is we work with you. The jury will come and sit and talk with you and kind of give tips and so on. And then you can have a concert.
Hmm.
And I remember that this ensemble from University of Gilan, they were performing a piece by Meshkatian.
Hmm.
Meshkatian is not from ages ago. He just died rather young, and that's only 15 years ago. I mean, it's not. And then it
Yeah.
was even 10 years ago. I mean, he is very contemporary, and he
Yeah.
himself had the spirit of the times, more or less, right?
Yeah.
And they were performing that piece of Meshkatian like a computer. It
Mm.
wasn't wrong. I mean, you couldn't say that this note is wrong or that the rhythm is blah blah or whatever. Computer wise, like a robot, like an AI,
Hmm.
it was correctly done, but it
Hmm.
sounded like dead. And I stopped them at some point and said, I have a question for you. And
Hmm.
they were all like, okay. They
Hmm.
waited for something very big or philosophical and say, do you understand what a passage is?
Hmm.
And they all went silent and said, passage has its name on it. You pass
Hmm.
something to go from somewhere to somewhere.
Hmm.
So you need to see this passage. Meshkatian has a lot of passages in his compositions. You are going from here to there to arrive. So
Hmm.
play it like a passage.
Yeah.
And then they were very excited, but they couldn't perform it. And
Hmm.
the way they were performing it, I laughed about it and said, come on, if you see someone you love in
Hmm.
like coming towards you in 20 meters and you run towards them,
Hmm.
what do you do when you arrive?
Hmm.
And then they kept looking at me.
Hmm.
The whole concept of moving towards something, and I expected them to say that, okay, we jump and hug each other, we just say, hey, to express some peak of emotion. They
Yes.
didn't know.
Hmm.
So even when I brought this idea of passage to running to
Hmm.
find someone to hold someone dear or whatever, it was kind of absent. It was as if they really didn't have the experiences of their own emotions.
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
if you lack that, it would be very difficult for any teacher to push you in
Hmm.
that direction.
Yeah.
I've tried this approach with many learners. For some of them, for those actually who are more connected with themselves, with their
Yeah.
own thoughts, with their own emotions, and so on, it worked, but with some, in some cases with a high percentage, it was like, I don't know what you're talking about. It's as if many people were partly disconnected with their inner world.
Yeah.
And that is, I think, what the changes in the world today have caused. I don't know if
Mm.
it's a effect of internet, if it's an effect of like a paradigm shift in human relationship, because
Mm.
what you're talking about, it's all about connecting, right?
Communication. I'm
Communicating.
connected.
It's all about
Mm.
people's relationships. And if that changes, it
Mm.
wouldn't be very far-fetched to think of changes in the consequences, right? If I come from a world where loving someone is a powerful, passionate
Mm.
source of energy,
Mm.
it's a different world I live in than
Mm.
someone who sees the world as um, a big shop for entertainment and pastime.
Yeah.
So I think
Mm.
this is also, I'm not a sociologist, I'm not a psychologist, but only observing other people and how they relate, I can sense some shifts there too.
Yeah. I would just mention the case of violinists or
Hmm.
prodigies.
Uh-huh.
And I will go back to the very early time of the 20th century where all the big violinists who play concerts, concertos, whatever,
Mm-hmm.
when they were little kids, most of them, and some of the great musicians mentioned this, he said most of these kids play things in a perfect way, but doesn't have any meaning actually to what they play, even though they are spending hours and hours and months of practice to go for competitions and they win competitions. These pieces are not the same way they are felt when played by a great artist. They don't
Mm-hmm.
have like an inner world or an experience to take it over to these pieces, except for very few of them. I would mention Minahan, for example.
Mm-hmm.
When he was a child, people noticed that he had a different way of expressing the pieces as a child compared to many others,
Mm-hmm.
not able to have the same experience delivering the pieces. And that was way before the internet. It's a paradigm shift, maybe in
Okay.
more into today's, but in those old days, maybe this is an example of this individualized experience. Okay, what experience did you live to
Right.
have a real, true expression of what you feel, or maybe
Mm-hmm.
have an image to what you play,
So
which is missing.
are you saying that the people from the last decades are lacking experience?
No, I would say this happened even almost a century ago,
Okay.
right? And we talk kids as an example here,
Right.
kids prodigies,
Yeah.
violinists in particular, and it
Mm-hmm.
applies to many other.
Definitely.
Yeah, and the concept is where is the individualized experience lived by this little or big artist that will be reflected into these played pieces.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. Yeah.
Like what you said earlier, right? Nowadays, who is investing into his emotions or her emotions, into trying to give reflections or meanings to what they play, other than either copying or memorizing an execution that's said to be perfect? Like a
Right.
model, they say this is good. People say this is good. They get paid when they do it. Let's do it,
Right. Exactly. It's
or
less
they
risk.
get praised.
You brought me to another point which I find,
Yeah.
I don't want to use hard words, but I don't like it personally.
Mm,
And that is bringing this model of business
mm,
onto the world of arts. I'm not
mm.
saying that art productions cannot be or should not be sold, so to speak. Of course, the
Yeah.
artists should also be able to make a living, right? I
Yes.
mean, if you
Yes.
create if you create a piece of music and people listen to it, it would be good that you are paid so that you can go on create more music if it's good. And if you
mm,
are doing, if you're taking the trouble to prepare something to do a real concert, then people
mm,
should also go for that and pay for it so that you can do
mm,
more. There's nothing wrong with that.
mm,
And what is, I think, how to say twisted here is
mm,
that although you are producing something and there should be some business on the side, like making
mm,
money, it's not a business as a priority. So that the
mm,
model of the business model should not go on top of it.
mm,
It might come on the side, but I say it might only because it
mm.
can kill it.
Yeah.
One reason is exactly what you mentioned. If I want to have a product which is guaranteed that people will buy, I will have to copy the previous successful ones. Why risk?
Yes.
Or I will have to go and see what people like and market
Mm,
that kind of like, I mean, do
mm.
a research on the market and
Yeah.
then come back and produce something that people want. This is totally the opposite of the artistic
Mm,
experience. And if
yeah.
you apply the business model onto the production of, I mean, as a creation, they will go wrong. It will go
Yeah.
only in the show business, so to speak.
Exactly. Exactly.
It's always getting a lot of applause. There was a time in Iran which
Mm,
DAF had become quite popular. Suddenly, DAF was really
mm,
blossoming on the scene. And it became like the thing in every uh, second grade concert and on. I
mm,
mean, not the best, not the top ones, but from the second grade downwards. In every concert, there was a spot for the percussion, which was usually tombak and daf, to
mm,
have a rhythmic kind of solo spot or duo
mm,
spot. And it would always get into something to make the people give an applause.
mm,
And it was always with making a lot of blah, 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 up and down and make it faster. And it was always, almost always, totally irrelevant of the rest of the program.
mm.
I mean, what is a circus?
Yeah.
If you really want to see it as it is, I'm not saying circus is a bad thing, but you can't say concert and then do a circus. If you want to do circus show, go do a circus show. If you want to do a concert, do a concert. And
Yeah.
mixing these never helps, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Sorry if I'm making
Exactly.
too many manifestos.
No, actually, there is always that opportunity for all types of tastes in the radio in the past,
Hmm.
on the social media, concerts, whatever. If space is given to people so they can have an opportunity to choose and go for the particular taste rather than making one type of standardized taste and push for it and kill the other artists. I mean, this kind of taste is the game of the AI today. The basic AI available publicly
Hmm.
is the game of it. We can
Yeah.
produce all this similar standard stuff,
Hmm.
right? So, going back to the message, the concept of the message, we would like to go for a break, but I would like to just maybe take this discussion for a break, which is the message itself might not be into one level, right? It could be of several levels. Like if we look at a great piece of art in a painting or a piece of poetry, we could see the surface meaning, maybe a second layer of meaning, a third layer of meaning. So we can pop in as
Hmm.
much as we like and pop out as much as we like, right?
Right.
And this all depends on how much energy that artist has put into the artwork.
Yeah.
And
Or how deep it can become. You
yeah,
can,
exactly.
how deep, how much depth
Mm,
there is.
And we have seen great examples from very old composers to recent ones, and same for paintings, poetry, theater, everything.
Right. There are
Mm,
many good examples of how something takes shape as
Mm.
a piece of, in
Mm.
our case, music. I've
Yeah.
heard some of them. I was lucky to hear some of them myself from the creative person, the creative musician himself. One of them, which is probably also interesting for those who know Hossein Alizadeh,
Mm.
is his creation of Dad o Bidad, Dad and Bidad, but we usually connect words with O in between for Persian
Mm.
speakers, which a lot of people took as a, as we had talked in another episode about this, as a maqam. A lot of people also took as an innovation of Alizadeh to connect these two maqams,
Mm.
to say that, okay, this Dasgah system is not closed. You can use
Mm.
this stuff and create other things with them and so on. But the
Yeah.
story of how he came to uh,
Mm.
create this is also very interesting. He has, he was out of Iran for a while, and he has been thinking of doing a concert when he comes back.
Mm.
And it was in the time when the society was changing. Again, another example like Darwish Khan, with the changes in society and politics, in the direction that reformists would take the, at least the government, if not the whole power. And in those times, some of the people were pessimists, some were optimists,
Mm.
and there was this air of doubt if things can go better, if things can come to sit in their place, and so on. And Alizadeh had the feeling that, will there be justice for people, or will there still be injustice? How would it feel between justice and injustice? And in Farsi, Dad is justice and Bidad is injustice.
Mm.
And thinking of these themes of the society, the idea of justice, will it be shown, will justice prevail or not? He suddenly thought that, oh, actually, we have Dad and Bidad in the Dasgah system.
Mm.
And then he tried to kind of connect them in a yin yang sort of way, that it goes back and forth. It's not
Mm.
settling in Dad, it's not settling in Bidad, it's going from one to another. And he created, with this yin yang kind of back and forth, he created a cycle which still is like a Dasgah cycle.
Mm.
But the most beautiful and important thing is that he didn't do it as a discovery on
Mm.
like, oh, I found that dot can be connected with B dot. No, it came from another social, emotional kind of experience in his head. And he wanted to find the medium, the right medium to express it. And because it was deeper, he kind of also chose the right poetry to go with that, and the rhythm, the way people were, because it's one instrument player, he himself,
Mm.
and two percussionists,
Mm.
and four singers.
Yeah.
And with the singers, you hear the polyphonic texture.
Mm.
This whole setup also matches the concept. This is like layer by layer, as you said. When it comes from a deeper idea, it's not just
Mm.
like a surface composition order. Like, oh, you have
Mm.
discovered dot plus b dot, so compose something in dot and b dot. What do you do as a pish daromad? It's not like that. It's not the factory line. There is a concept the artist wants to bring to life, and because of that concept, the rest will also come together. And then
Mm.
after he performed it in Tehran, of course, it was quite a big bomb. I mean, it was like a woo, what
Yeah.
happened here on the concert stage?
Mm.
And then a bit later, the recording also came out. The name of the album is called Razeno.
Mm.
Literally, it's translated to New Secret, but I think they have a different English name for the album.
Yeah.
And we were all impressed, all the younger musicians, all the people, all the audience, potential audience, and so on, were just like looking at Alizadeh as a big figure of, wow, what you have done. And still, many people take that as a peak of Alizadeh's career.
Mm.
I don't think so. I think it's one of his very beautiful peaks. But
Mhm.
I wanted to say that one of the best experiences that we all know in Iran about comes from that type of conceptualizing,
Mm.
not from the mechanics or anything. He is good to put the technique into the context of the concept.
Interesting. That's very interesting, and it's reflective of the previous discussion of enlightening people for what is more important. And
Yes.
this is a great example of somebody who learns the thing in a different way.
And he knows all the Radif stuff. He is educated with all the copying, with all the, I mean, by the book. If you go by the book, he knows all.
Yeah.
It's not like he does these things because he doesn't know the traditional Daskar
Mm.
stuff. But he
Yeah.
is this individual artist who has this experience to communicate, at least in my opinion.
Yeah. And that has a lot of energy that we should experience now together with a Nadi audience.
Great.
We'll listen to it.
Thank you.
You mentioned earlier the word ritual and concert. Can you elaborate more on this?
Sure. I think rituals from the ancient times, from the dawn of humanity, actually, have been there and they are very important in
Mhm.
many different ways. And the reason, a ritual in the sense of you are going through some preset, pre-coded atmosphere making and behavioral patterns and so on to prepare for something
Code of
to happen.
conduct.
Yes.
Mm,
And why is that important for music? I think it's
mm,
absolutely important when you are talking about a concert, when you are talking about this sharing of artistic experience.
mhm,
The reason is that if you take the ritual out,
mhm,
you haven't prepared the receiver to tune
mm,
into the sender's wave and vice
mhm,
versa.
mhm.
Without the ritual, I mean, nowadays we have music everywhere available, right? We click twice or so, we do a search and we find what we want, and then we jump from A to B, from this music to that, and everybody's happy about it. I understand the good thing about it. I use it too. The availability is great, but what
Yeah.
is missing is the ritual.
Mm,
You are not preparing yourself to get into that world. And because of that, a lot of your focus and the possibilities to get as sensitive as possible in your own dimensions will be limited, will be distracted. You're not there. And
mhm,
then the musicians who are not fully aware of this, of what is lacking, they just think, okay, people are not paying attention to us, so let's do some, in Ross Daly's words, let's do some fireworks to get their attention.
yeah.
So what they do is that they show off something. They show things that people say, oh, let's see what's happening to get a bit of attention. But this doesn't replace ritual because the
Mhm,
inner world is not ready. They are just
mhm,
paying attention in the sense of like acrobatics.
mhm.
Like somebody is doing something. Let me put something in brackets. These days, we are also in Europe, we are facing this championship, the football matches between European
Yeah.
countries. That even has quite a ritual. I
Mm,
mean, people do go through a lot of this and that to prepare themselves to go to these stadiums and watch a football or at home or wherever they're watching, to just watch a football game, which doesn't have to do anything with artistic experience, right?
mhm,
They do it as entertainment, peaks of, I don't know, emotions and feeling united with a group of other people who are fans of the same team or whatever. Or some
mm,
just want to watch it and enjoy it, fine. I don't have anything against it.
mm,
I do watch it at times too. But what I wanted to say is that a ritual is so important as human beings that if you take that out, just tuning to the TV channel which is broadcasting the football would be totally neutral to you.
mhm,
If you are not into the ritual, that football match doesn't mean anything to you. The other person is really going through a lot to get into that world. So,
yeah.
for a real concert, to have this communication happening in the right way, the ritual is necessary.
Yeah.
And it's
Interesting.
totally different from a show, and it's totally different from clicking on the internet. I
Mhm,
hope people don't find me too fanatic or too old style, but because it's
mhm,
something I have experienced many times. I was lucky enough to experience a lot. I think it would be a pity to forget about it.
yeah.
Still, it might be, and I know a lot of people who say, okay, this was like a spirit of a limited time to do concerts. Let's
Mhm,
change it to smaller gatherings or change it back to the old style.
yeah.
Fine. That is also nice. There's nothing against that. We can have smaller groups of audience. Still, that needs a kind of ritual of its own. I mean,
Yeah.
in those parties that I was talking about with Saba and the others performing, I know that, for example, they would have a couple of candles, no lights on, and people would sit in a particular setting, and everybody would go quiet, and there would be an atmosphere created before the
Hmm.
musicians would start performing. And with that, then something comes back to the musician who's also sharing, and that is what that type of musician would take as uh, what the audience does to the actual performance of music. I'm sure you've heard of it. That
Yeah.
there are some musicians who say, "Oh, tonight's concert was not good. There was a bad wave coming from the audience," or
Yes.
"Tonight's music was very good because there was such an energy from the audience."
Hmm. Yeah.
That is the let's call it the channel of energy. The channel is
Yes.
open for this communication or not. That needs a ritual.
Let's label this as bidirectional channel and come
Okay.
back to it in a minute. But uh, talking about the rituals, first starting with the unfocused brain of nowadays, of multitasking. Okay, we are doing a lot of multitasking, and we believe that this is a sign of being intelligent. Actually, this is ruining the quality of our deliverables or what we receive, how much we comprehend, how much we output. And we have seen a lot of research talking about the bad habits of multitasking, and people can go and research about this and read about it. Now, people are advised to go and learn how to get into the focus, into maybe what you call rituals, right? Even for doing our work or writing articles or whatever. Now, going
Right.
back to the rituals of listening or rituals of practicing, even for musicians, they don't know how to focus when they practice, unfortunately, right?
Right.
And
That's true.
all of this requires training. This training could be the small set of people, like you mentioned, which requires iterations of doing the same thing with a small group, or maybe learning how to listen with a lot of techniques rather than just think that this can happen automatically, right, Dr. Nagar? And this is a problem, really. This is really a big problem that requires training. I'd like to highlight the bi-directional communication between the artist, the musician, and the audience. I like when you said the energy coming from the audience. They are not passive, that they just receive music, isn't it?
Right. Yeah,
Mm.
there are, you know better than I do, there are these pictures, these videos of Kulthum's concerts.
Hmm.
And the audience sitting there are even more active than the musicians on stage in the emotional expression.
Mm.
The wave coming from them, and the way they express their ecstasy moments
Mm.
somehow. It
Yeah.
adds a lot. I mean, if you experience the opposite, if you go somewhere, I've experienced it at times that I go on stage, I put my all energy into the opening of the concert, and then what I feel is like a heavy curtain in between me and the audience.
Hmm.
It's as if they have lost this presence of we
Mm.
are human beings communicating, and they are just sitting there like watching a screen.
Mm.
And that is really destructive. I don't know if everybody would see it this way, but for me it was like I could do a lot better, but because of that heavy thick curtain I
Mm.
closed the communication.
Yeah.
And at some point I decided, okay, I do it for myself because I'm on stage, I have to continue. So I do it for myself. But if it was still connected, it would go better and better, at least for
Mm.
me. And I know some other musicians who are the same, but of course not everybody is like that.
Yeah. I think, yeah, I mean, versus other cases where the audience understands and reacts, as you said, but taking it to the audience side, it is the feedback that the artist receives, which means my message has reached the destination and there was a feedback, a
Right.
concept of feedback. And that's a very important thing. This is the thing
Absolutely.
that teaches us that we are understood, we are felt for what we feel and what we have experienced, isn't it?
Right. Right. And
Mm.
of course, not every music is concert music, but there have been and there still is music for other constellations, like in a taverna, for example. There
Yeah.
you can also see the same kind of, I mean, the emotional uh,
Reaction.
feedback loop, like it goes and
Mm.
comes. And if that is
Mm.
missing, there in that context, especially, the musician will understand that, oops, I have failed
Yeah.
in my task. I have failed.
Mhm.
That's certainly very important.
Exactly. So the audience is maybe giving a sign of failure, but that all depends on what message are we carrying over through music. Maybe the audience doesn't understand the language. Maybe
That
they
is
are
very
not
common.
educated enough or they don't have enough exposure to great stuff. In that case, we either lower the level of the artist or maybe the artist decide to do it for himself, regardless where is he doing that or where is she doing that. The other extreme thing, Dr. Nagar, is when we listen to gramophones for people who we never met. Maybe they are anonymous,
Right.
no name of an artist, and you listen and it hits you and you feel. That's like something that is like disconnected channel, but it works. It's
It-
surprisingly working.
yeah, I think that is the message in the bottle. You
Yeah.
don't see the sender, but um, what I can imagine, that's only a personal imagination, but I think th the musician, the creator of that message, was imagining the right audience, right in the sense that the audience who would connect with this message, an ideal audience somehow.
Mhm.
And the message was recorded for that ideal audience.
Mm.
And then if it happens that you are among that type of audience, then it hits you. But you can also
Mhm.
play the same thing for somebody else and they feel like, okay, maybe, is it good? uh, there are, it's not hitting everybody. We can call it difference of education too. I mean, there is certainly a different level of education involved, but
Mm.
more than that, it's also about what kind of what kind of world I have in mind.
Mm.
Let me put it in a different kind of setting.
Mm.
I very much like cinema.
Mm.
I always have. There was an Iranian movie maker, Abbas Kiarostami. He was very famous around the world, and he made his own very special style of movies. And I
Mm.
remember I was always following his work, of course. And I remember once one of his very last movies. I mean, last in the sense that because censorship was serious, so he couldn't go on making movies in Iran that much longer. But one of his
Mhm.
last that he did screen in Iran was, I think, The Taste of Cherries. It was translated to Ta'ame Gilas was the Farsi name. And it
Mm.
was about someone who had decided to commit suicide.
Mm.
And he had even chosen the spot and digged the grave, but he was taking people to that spot to ask them to bury him afterwards,
Mm.
just to put the soil on top. And this
Mm.
was the encounter between that person and the people who was being taken to that spot and how they would reflect on this, right? It was a
Mhm.
very philosophical kind of um, expression of what life is about.
Mm.
I liked it, but I saw a lot of people saying that, well, this was all like not nice pictures. What we were seeing was just a lot of soil and dust and didn't make any sense to us.
Mhm.
This is probably made only for Cannes Festival and so on. If you have such an artist who is
Mm,
talking about a topic which is not that public, or not
mm,
interesting for a lot of public, or they can't, they are expecting a movie where, like Bollywood, you can see a lot
yeah,
of colors, dancing, fighting, such stories, and comes to such
mm,
a movie, of course they would be disappointed.
yeah.
If I take this as a lack of education, well, people might call
It's
me
a
being
taste.
biased. But
It's taste, exposure, training,
a lot
right?
of, all of them involved, yeah. But so
Mm,
if I take that into the world of music,
mm,
it becomes, in my opinion, a lot more difficult to judge, because with films you usually have characters, you have some sort of a storyline. People are supposedly more prone to somehow identify with someone in that story, and so on and so forth. In the world of music, these are absent. So music itself can be more abstract. So more education is needed to
mhm.
kind of follow what is happening, or
Yeah.
how what was supposed to be expressed is being expressed. I know a lot of people, maybe we have talked about this once before, they reflected on a piece of music as, I don't like it. And then when I asked why, can you say why you don't like it? And then they would say, this is sad music. I don't like sad music. And then I said, okay, first of all, why don't you like sad music?
Mm,
Sad music can be useful. I mean,
yeah.
there are times that a person is sad. A
Yeah.
reflection of sadness is communication. I mean, wouldn't you want to see a friend talk to you when they are sad, and then you console them, or the other way around? When you are sad, you talk to a friend, you might cry or whatever. This is a normal human being emotion.
Dr.
Secondly,
Nagar,
yeah,
they should say, you are sad. I don't like you. I will not talk to you.
actually, some people do this. Call me back when you're in a better mood. But the second part of the question was even better. I would say, okay, what do you find sad in this music? And when I
Mm,
went through the layers, I would realize that because there was not a steady beating or a pulsation or whatever, they thought it was sad.
yeah.
If exactly the same melody was put onto a rap like beat, so to speak, they wouldn't find it sad anymore.
Yeah.
That's another topic of how people code and decode emotions
Yeah.
in that so-called message, right?
Mhm.
Based on genre and whatever. So yes, there you would come to another sort of education, which, in my opinion, in the older times was somehow, decidedly or not, done through the official media, like through
Mhm.
the Ministry of Culture here and there in different countries, radio programs, you name it. But
Yeah.
nowadays, there's a jungle of things on the internet,
Mhm.
and some mainstream stuff which is more in the business, right? Show
Yeah.
business,
Yeah.
entertainment industry, and so on. And that has created less directed education, let's call it. I'm not
Mhm.
saying everybody should like classical music or Persian Daskar music or Ottoman classical music. Genres are different. One can
Yeah.
be
Yeah.
as free as you can imagine in choosing what genre. But if they are just choosing the most available, the most uh, n-
Accessible.
n- accessible in the sense of what is simple, in my
Mm.
opinion, that's like chewing gums all the time instead of getting nutrition.
Yeah. Or maybe the promoted stuff, because it's not the interest of the media to educate people or make them the way we describe now, right? But it's worth mentioning two things here, Dr. Nagar, reflecting on the previous discussion here. Carmen by Bizet was rediscovered after he passed away.
Hmm.
Okay, and Sarasate made uh, a sequel to that, influenced by Carmen.
Hmm.
And people might not understand the message sometimes. They
True.
say, why this is like that? Maybe it's too much stressful. This is not the way we get things. We used to get things received. Or sometimes, which is a question to you, Mr. Nagar, sometimes an artist maybe doesn't have enough technique conveying a new piece of music, maybe badly played, okay, not in tune, or maybe not properly written, or somebody else played it, but that's the only source. But it is a great message. If it was rediscovered in the hands of a sensible artist, it might be revived, brought to life with a great impact. And we have seen examples actually in music where the piece is so impactful, but nobody understood because they don't have the sensible ears and the experience to recognize great stuff, isn't it?
That's true. That's certainly true.
Yeah.
In Iran, I know a lot of examples in that direction in the so-called regional music, not
Mm,
in the so-called Persian Daskar, but the music from the ethnic groups. You can find a lot of authentic material. I was actually listening to some very beautiful Baluchi music the other day,
mm,
which was well, the player was also very good. I mean, you could
mm,
find him at a virtuoso level on his instrument,
mm,
which is called banjo in that area. Uh, the content of the music was absolutely alive. It was
mm,
really very beautiful. But even I hadn't heard that before. I say even I because I expected myself to know more about
mhm,
regional music of Iran. So it can happen that things are there, but not make it to the right audience, which I always say if I could, I'm busy enough with doing my
mm,
job, right? I expected the society to create positions and people like characters in positions that would take this as their responsibility to put
mm,
things in place in the sense of leading the stuff to the right audience,
mm,
uh, which a bit earlier, for example, when radio in Iran was very influential and important, there were for many years there were these series of Golha as a program.
mhm,
You might have heard about it, and the guy who was running it, Pir Nia was his name. Uh, he was such a person.
mhm,
He was really organizing and finding the right people for that kind of radio music, which would present it, and it had different hours and so on and so forth. It would present Daskar material in a very rich and yet accessible to the public to listen to.
mm,
And I think in the world today, it seems like as far as I know, we have a lack of such people somehow.
mm. Yeah.
People are more into promoting themselves
Yeah.
than doing anything like that. Even musicians these days are not that open to each other's work. When I was
Mm,
younger, when
mm,
I was around, I mean, between 20 and 30, with my circle of colleagues and friends with whom I worked a lot for many years, uh, we were always open to, I mean, we would always share what we have found, even if
mm,
it wasn't for recording, even if it wasn't for a concert, we would share ideas, we would have time spent together and so on. And we were genuinely interested
mm,
in this kind of sharing. But nowadays, well, I'm out of Iran. Maybe they are still sharing with one another, but
mhm,
I see very few people who would really have time and space for that
mm.
artistic experience in exchange with colleagues.
Yeah.
They are so, how to put it, confused with this and that, with doing a concert here tonight and then running to another city, playing with another ensemble, then taking the flight to go to another country to do a workshop. They are so busy that if
Mm,
they manage their own material, they are happy. And this is,
yeah.
I think, another thing that is affecting the message.
Yeah, this is maybe the impact of today's technology, accessibility, reach out,
Business
yeah, which is
model.
a new responsibility for the contemporary artists and the musicians.
In what way responsibility?
I
You
mean,
mean
they have to control their focus, their
right?
target, their objectives, their investment of time and effort.
True.
Talking about real artists,
Yeah.
right? So, and not to forget examples of discovering these melodies. An example is the Dailaman
Delaman,
by
yeah.
Saba.
Hmm.
Maybe you highlight Dr. Nagar, or maybe Chichen Kizi by Jamil Bey when he heard it in rural areas, and then he made a great piece that everybody loves and likes nowadays in Husseini. I
Hmm.
mean,
In,
these
in Saba's
artists, yeah,
in Saba's case, I know that the story of Deilamon got very famous, but that was his usual style. You might remember that there is this video of Ali Tajvidi telling the memory of Saba composing the piece Samani.
yes,
When Tajvidi goes to his class and he shows Tajvidi the door closing and opening, and the veg is making a bit of a
squeaking.
yeah.
Mm.
And Sabo asks Tajvidi, how does it sound like? And Tajvidi says, well, the door is not oiled well. But then Sabo shows him the first phrase of on the violin,
Yeah.
the, the core, or let's say the seed of the concept that
Hmm.
was simply inspired by the door. He
Mm.
shows it to Tajvidi, and then the next week when Tajvidi comes back, Sabah tells him that I finished that piece, and because it's settled now, I call it Samani. He plays the piece for him.
Yeah.
So this is a very good example that De Lamon and a couple of others people know about, that he was really very sensitive. We are talking about experience, right? He was fully
Mm.
open, very sensitive to all stimulus coming,
Yeah.
sounds of nature, even a door in his own classroom and whatnot, which would inspire him into a creation.
And that
Uh,
is full of energy till
Absolutely,
today
yeah.
from basic stuff.
From very basic. You have to have
Yeah.
your ears and eyes and sensory apparatus open, otherwise it won't work.
Yeah. Dr. Nagar, we mentioned earlier influences of imitation. Now, in the old days, imitation might be coming from a nearby musician who's living in the same village or city
Right.
that we interact and friction with. Then radio, uh, CDs, radio, sorry, not CDs, gramophones, radio, whatever media that have advanced to the level that people started to mix with other cultures, travel, listen to everything. And some people are very proud of listening to everything. But if it is random, this will distract them, right? Now, the influences of maybe understanding or taking the energy from great virtuosos, great composers versus mimicking like
Hmm.
MIDI files, okay,
Right.
or like uh, versus the technology, the way it impacts us, where we can play an ensemble on Zoom, for example.
Hmm.
Everything is happening today, right?
Right.
And as we said before,
Everything
hmm,
is happening except for the artistic experience.
yeah, now this is it. Yeah, I mean, what artists should do to make sure that they have personality, the energy, eternal pieces, eternal recordings.
You are, of course, asking for my very personal opinion. I mean, I'm sure
Yes.
each and every individual have their own ways of dealing if they want to. I mean, first you have to have the motive,
Yes.
motivation. I mean, uh, there is a very cute story. Today I'm like old people. I remember stories all the time. There is a
Yeah.
story about Ibn Sina, Avicenna,
Mm.
who
Yeah.
was after many years of trying to read um, which book was it? From Aristotle? I've forgotten the name
Hmm.
of the book. Sorry. Uh,
Logic, metaphysics.
uh, yes, ما بعد الطبيعة is the original name.
Metaphysics. Yeah.
Metaphysics. He
Mm.
had read that, but he didn't understand it. In the
Ah,
story, it says that I read it 40 times, but I didn't understand.
wow.
And then, and that was
Yeah.
Avicenna. And then suddenly, in a very crowded bazaar, somebody comes to him who was a pupil of Farabi, they say, the story goes, and wants to sell him a copy of Farabi's Sharh. I don't know how to
Hmm.
translate Sharh
Explanation
there. Explanation or
or
commentary,
margins. Yeah, commentary.
commentary on Mabad Tabi'iyya Aristotle, I mean the
Yeah. Mm.
metaphysics. And
Mm.
of course, Avicenna buys it
Hmm.
immediately. And he can't wait. So in that very crowded bazaar, he just sits down and reads it from the beginning to the end. And then he realizes that, oh, there was something wrong with the translations I was reading. This is the stuff. And he understands it. So the reason I remembered that story was that one of the skills we need to protect, as we talked about before, is focus.
Hmm.
And when we can't focus on what we want,
Hmm.
then a lot of things will fall apart.
Hmm.
If I can't keep my this time span, the attention time span, if I can't keep it longer and longer, how am I going to communicate a full program of a concert with the audience? I
Hmm.
need a rather big
Exactly.
time span of focus to manage this, and people are losing that. What happens is that they are distracted, and then as one of the videos about focus I was watching a couple of days ago was saying that we are distracted, but not only that, but also we distract ourselves. We are sitting doing something, and after a couple of minutes we get agitated, we go and check our phones.
Hmm.
We are distracting ourselves. We are really not allowing the minutes to pass so that we really focus to get into the so-called flow, the state
Hmm.
of getting energy and getting into work, so that you know it probably, the state of flow. So what the musician should do, I think, as a responsibility, uh,
Mm.
is it's a personal thing, of course. What I'm suggesting is to first of all work on the focus.
Mm.
Second, rethink or recheck frequently the message, so to
Mm.
speak. What I'm doing, why I'm doing, for what communication, in what context.
Mhm.
Maybe it's a bit extreme, and for some musicians it might be a bit like, what are you talking about? I have to do 60 concerts per year and the audiences are different. So what I'm doing is that I do my music and I travel like
Mhm.
gypsies. I take it
Mhm.
from city to city, from town to town. Some of people would like it, some wouldn't. Fine, I understand that. But I think the result of such an attitude would be, if you're not aware of it, would be detaching from your inner world after a
Mhm.
while. But that's the way I see it. What I
Mhm.
would really suggest is uh, to give yourself the nurturing time, nurturing for the soul, for the inner world,
Mhm.
from time to time. I mean, the idea is not mine. There are a lot of even institutes in the world that would offer the so-called retreats for artists.
Mm.
And the idea
Yeah.
is that the artist goes to a different setting and focuses on
Mhm.
something to come to some product or some exhibition, whatever, concert.
Residencies.
Yeah,
Mm.
like a residency. And those retreats or residencies are created after this need that you want to really sit at it and
Mm.
get yourself isolated from what you want not to do. And I guess in our world today, we need to do that ourselves from time to time. I don't know, depending on what person you are and how you think. You might need it once a month or once a
Mhm.
week to get such a uh, residency at home. And
Yeah.
then I think a lot of inspiration sources, not just music. That's again very personal. But for me, stories, poetry, uh, what is happening with people, like in a social matter,
Mm.
those are all kind of energies that
Yeah.
I absorb, and it takes a bit of time to kind of go up and down in me and cook something, and then I might
Mm.
be able to come up with some music through which I can share that. But
Mm.
if I don't have anything to say, I can't do music. I mean, I can play, of
Interesting.
course, but it's not the creation of the music. The playing is
Mm.
there. I can play something that was created before by me or by somebody else. I can try to get as close as possible to its original state, but the true creation for me has to have been gone through this process
Mm.
of some
Interesting.
energy absorbed and then take shape inside me into some sort of need of expression to
Yeah.
share with somebody else.
Interesting. Now, I will come back to this sharing thing, but a comment in Ibn Sina story where he was trying his best to understand as much as possible. He was so patient, so focused. And at the same time, he was only satisfied when he saw things are working. He's talking about concepts here. Everything is almost concepts in there.
True.
That's
A
the
lot.
pre-physics stuff. They call it metaphysics, but it is pre-physics. Aristotle's time. It's really a great story. Uh, the other thing is about gypsies. You mentioned Dr. Nagar, and this maybe links to sharing and communication, where an artist maybe has a message, he experienced something, she experienced something, or they created a piece of work, or maybe they rendered it and reflected based on their own experience with that repertoire work. But that needs to be shared. Maybe they are sharing to themselves. The message is going back to themselves,
Can be.
right?
Yeah, yeah, sure.
Yeah. And gypsies, we have seen gypsies, which are really all types of gypsies. I don't want to mention the name gypsies for a certain group or tribe or whatever. Uh, they always had a different way of carrying a message because the way they treat music and express it and interpret it and deliver it is different, even when they are part of an orchestra doing a concerto.
Hmm.
We have seen it. What do you think, Victor Nagar?
Before I answer that question, I want to add that by naming gypsies, I didn't mean their music. I meant in the style of traveling. Like
Yeah,
you don't have a place to stay, but you are roaming
but I
around.
wanted I wanted to use that for an
Okay.
opportunity of a good question.
Well, first of all, I think sharing with yourself is very nice. But
Yeah,
if you want to share with yourself, then why bother an audience? Uh,
exactly. That's an
the-
extreme case, isn't it?
it
Because
is.
sometimes you write a piece of poetry or piece of art and you say, it will be silly if I show this to someone else who doesn't understand it. Let's be frank and honest. It happens, and we have stories of such.
True. Yeah. Well,
Yeah,
in the sense of poetry, I know a lot of people who write poetries, and then they share it only with one or two close friends, and
yeah,
that's which I understand very well. I think it makes a lot of sense, but they are still sharing. If you
or
don't
maybe share
share,
later.
yes, I know that if you keep it for some years later of your own,
Mm.
uh, in- how to say, or your own state in the future, that's
Yeah.
also sharing. I can share myself with myself in different times.
Mm.
So this is another aspect of communicating. I can write down something now, but it's only for myself. I come
Hmm.
back to it in 5 years, 10 years, 50 years or so, and I revisit this
Mm.
moment. That's also very nice and beautiful. But here the audience is the future Negar. There
Yes.
still
And
is
sometimes you get surprised. You say, wow, did I say that 10 years ago? Did
you
I
can,
write this? Or sometimes say, wow, that's a good opportunity to make a new work based on this, or maybe
right,
complete it or rewrite it.
definitely.
Yeah,
Yeah, it happens a
interesting.
lot. I mean, with motives in music, I'm sure it happens a lot.
Mm.
I've heard it from other musicians. I've experienced it myself too, that somehow in the middle of doing something, you find an idea
Mm.
comes up, but you don't either have the time or the situation is not ready. You
Mm.
just have the core concept somehow, the core musical concept. It
Hmm.
happens to me, and then I just record it
Yeah.
quickly. It might be like 20 seconds or so. It's
Mhm.
not long. I keep it somewhere, and then sometime in the future, for some other reason, I come back to it.
Mm.
And I think a lot of musicians do this actually. They make notes, so to speak, like a
Yes.
writer making notes. A lot of writers do make notes when they go here and there, or when they imagine a character. They might write one or two paragraphs and they put it aside. And then when they sit at a project to
Mm.
write a story, for example, they use all these little fragments and so on. And in music, I've had it a lot that something
Mhm.
came up, I recorded it for a couple of seconds on my phone, and then sometime in the future I come back to it, maybe with another concept, with the core concept now. And
Mm.
I go back to it and I use that fragment, so to speak. It happens
Yeah.
to me.
And these ideas might be very precious, but they are so volatile. They can disappear quickly and as if nobody imagined them. So it's
Yeah.
all good to go and record them and write them somewhere in one way or
Yeah,
another.
definitely. The question
Yes.
is, will, for me, the question is, will it reach the right audience? Will they sometime somehow? And I always, in the last years, I always come back to this question
Mm.
of how much precious work
Mm.
of the authentic creative people in the past that I might know of or not
Hmm.
have been lost.
Yeah,
I'm
exactly.
sure a lot. I mean, it's not just us in this time. We now at least we are lucky to have the possibility of technology, which is actually very good for this.
Yes.
We now have the possibility of technology to preserve things,
Yeah.
but a bit, uh, I mean, a while ago, maybe half a century ago, so it wasn't that easy. And it would be, I'm sure a lot of musicians have had ideas which they were not recorded, they never recorded, or they didn't put it on a paper, or so they might have played it for a friend and that was it.
Yeah,
It's gone.
exactly. So with all the challenges we have, we must utilize technology to help us. The
I
technology we blame.
certainly- we
Technology we
should put it
blame.
in place.
Dr. Nagar, you mentioned Nagar and later stage, previous stage. Let's hear some of the like pieces that you have
Back
done.
to the
Please,
future.
yeah.
Never
Please
back to the
select one of your work.
Yeah, sure, I would love to if
Let's,
the
yeah.
audience, if
What would
the
you?
audience would like to hear it. I have a rather recent composition of mine, which actually falls into this category of having an idea, having it recorded somewhere for only one line or so, and then come back to it. There was an event a couple of months ago in
Mm.
a rather well-known festival in Freiburg in our area here in Germany, and they were holding an evening, a concert with three, four performances on the theme of DAF, music from the homeland of DAF. That was the topic,
Yeah.
and I was invited to also perform.
Hmm.
And then I remembered that I had a kind of sketch like one of these 20-second ideas uh,
Hmm.
which was basically a mood of how to go for a melody, but not a full melody. On the opening of a Sagi Name by
Mm-hmm.
Hafiz, Bia
Yeah.
Sagi Make Hala, which is traditionally done in a totally different rhythm. Bia Sagi Make Hala. It's usually done in this kind of rhythm. In a couple of daskas, you can do it. But my
Mm-hmm.
idea was actually to go with the rhythm of the poem itself. Vi har sorgen make halavare, kind of like this.
Mm-hmm.
And then I suddenly saw the image of a gathering, imagining Hafiz
Mm-hmm.
sitting in that gathering, asking the Sagi, the bearer of the cup, so to speak, which could be a ritual to give
Yeah.
you the ecstasy. I mean, it's not just about drinking wine. It can be really like a Sufi ritual in that
Mm-hmm.
context. And he's asking the Sari to come and serve what can bring the ecstasy.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember it very clearly, and still to my surprise,
Mm-hmm.
I had the idea. I remembered the sketch, and right after breakfast, I opened the poetry, and somehow the lines were getting grayed out and not
Mm-hmm.
because I didn't go with the whole poetry and I didn't go in the order of lines. They were just showing themselves to me somehow, and the melodies were taking shape. So I took the recorder, I just sang what was coming, and then I checked it on the oud, and then I refined a little bit here and there, and it was the composition we performed with. Unfortunately, not much time to practice, but we performed with Murad Kushtun in the festival, who's also the organizer. The whole piece is basically the poetry, the oud, and the daf.
We'll listen to it.
I hope you like it.
We will do.
بیا ساقیان می که حال آوره، بیا ساقیان می که حال آوره. بیا ساقیان می که حال آوره. ساقیان می که حال آوره، کرامت فزاید، کرامت فزاید، کمال آوره. به من ده که بس بیدل افتاده، من ده که بس بیدل افتاده و از این هر دنیا حاصل افتاده. بگو تا مویم به آواز بده تا بگویم به آواز جمشید کی بود کاووس کی. ساقیان آتش تابناک، بیا ساقیان آتش تابناک که زرتشت می جویدش زیر خاک. ساقیان آب اندیش سوز، بیا ساقیان آب اندیش سوز، بیا ساقیان آب باشد شود پیش سوز بده تا روم بر فلک شیرگیر بده تا روم بر فلک شیرگیر به هم برزنم دام این گرگ پیر به هم برزنم دام این گرگ پیر بگوی و بزن خسروانی سرود مغنی مغنی ملولم مغنی دوتایی بزن به یکتایی او که تایی بزن چنان برکش آواز خونیاگری به رقص آوری عرصه رستخیز تو خون سراحی به ساغر بریز. در این خون فشار عرصه رستخیز تو خون سراحی به ساغر بریز. سر فتنه دارد، سر فتنه دارد دگر روزگار. من مستی و فتنه چشم یار. مغنی بزن آنا این سرود. مغنی بزن آنا این سرود. بگو دم 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 حتى أصوم لديارة دم 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 حتى أصوم لديارة من پیام هنی او گزنگاوا وقت هالده بوجر دستم من پیام هنی او گزنگاوا وقت هالده بوجر دستم خاروی کوری آگری سورم آگر سورکی کردستم
Dr. Nagar, if we look at the practice of music, okay, for musicians, it's like a game that is going back to decades and centuries of what we know from the lives of great musicians, composers, music players, and so on. And this game has its own rules and rituals, code of conduct, perceptions, respect, creativity, all these. Sorry for a long question. But can't we learn from this going forward, regardless if the context has changed in the technology, the way we perceive music or we make music? Can't we learn a lesson from this?
We certainly can, if you ask me. What I personally always enjoyed learning from my heroes, so to speak, like the
Yeah.
musicians and all the creative people I admired, what
Mm.
I personally learned from them was that they were creating what they're genuinely experiencing themselves.
Mhm.
So I didn't want to become them. What I
Yes,
learned from them was to become myself.
exactly.
But I can also imagine that for many people, this is a very vague idea. What is myself?
Mhm.
That takes quite some other kind of um, process uh, to see what is the difference. Where do you draw the line? If I
Mhm.
play a piece by Sabah or Tajvidi or Paivar, I'm not myself anymore. If I talk to you and I bring in some ideas from another person or questions that somebody else had put forward or the thoughts that I was inspired by from a book, is it me? I mean, it can be a very philosophical kind of complicated question or
Mm.
topic. I mean, but I think what matters is to stay loyal to what one himself or herself really feels and thinks they understand.
Mhm.
I insist on this thinks. I mean, I
Yeah.
might not fully understand a piece of poetry or
Mm.
a person who's an expert on Hafiz and on Sagi Name might come to me and say that, Negar, you're totally wrong. What you thought about this kind of imagination of a group of people and Sagi and Morani and whatnot in this concept of Sagi Name is not true. It's simply
Mhm.
based on nothing.
Yeah.
Okay, that is very possible. But to the best of my understanding, I stayed
Mm.
loyal.
Yeah.
I that's what I mean by trying to be myself. I try to be authentic in the sense that I'm true to myself.
Mhm.
Of course, I try to expand this self. I try to
Mhm.
grow up. I try to check what is real, what is not real. I try to have more knowledge about both inside and outside world. I mean, let's be honest about it. When you read a piece of poetry that somebody else is expressing their love toward their beloved,
Mm.
let it be a beloved human being, or in the Sufi order, like about the
Mm.
big truth or God or whatever you want to name
Mhm.
it. When you read that, what
Mm.
kind of experience are you following?
Mhm.
Aren't you learning somehow the
Mhm.
way that person was feeling love?
Mhm. Yeah.
One can, that's back to the subject we kind of mentioned in the beginning. The artistic experience, if communicated through pieces of art, should be able to really communicate between people in the sense that I somehow also experience what the creator was experiencing, at least from
Yeah.
some angle.
Mhm.
It might be
Interesting.
a different understanding. My perception might be different from the perception of the writer about that love. But still, I get an image of
Yeah.
how Hafez was seeing the Sagi. If I
Yes.
can manage to bring Hafez from the other world down and I
Mhm.
ask him, he might say, no, come on, I was really talking about the person who was pouring wine and we were having a good time. It wasn't about what you thought and so on. Or the other way around, that it wasn't with rhythm, it wasn't meant like that. He can say those things, of course, in another imaginary situation. But still, the way I imagined it, I wasn't trying to be the factory line, uh, school kind of checked
Mhm.
production of something. I was trying to bring that world of my own imagination onto the medium,
Mhm.
whatever the medium was. Might be successful, might be not. I mean, all true creative processes are prone to a lot of risk. You might
Yes.
come to a point where something is totally uh, dysfunctional.
Mm.
It's falling apart. That's what, as far as I've heard from artists, that what they are afraid of, and they feel like, oh, I hope this one also works. Even that the most
Mhm.
successful ones, they have experienced the previous time how it can work, but they are never sure.
Yeah.
It might work again, might not work again. But back to the beginning, I think the only thing I personally think we should learn is to be true to ourselves and try to expand the self.
Mhm.
The more we expand it, the greater our experience area will become, and then hopefully the deeper the outcome. Or at
Yeah.
least that's the way I see it.
Interesting. So they need to learn from the previous generations, from the repertoire, from their own experience to be themselves. Like those became themselves at their time.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Plus, uh, believing in themselves,
And then trying
building.
to,
Mm.
absolutely, and believing in the sense that uh, you connect with yourself. You don't lose contact with your own emotions, with your own reflections.
Mhm.
That's, I think, very important. And of course, the most important factor is imagination. If you don't
Mm.
have any, if you don't allow your let's call it the bird of imagination, if you don't allow it to fly, you are
Mhm.
very limited. It's very difficult to let anything happen. Any creation, actually. I mean, even if I want to think of, let's say, I want to change the decoration in some room. I don't go moving things around the room all the time. I first come up with an idea that, what would it be like if I put this here, if I put that table there, if I put the computer here, and so on. I imagine something, then I
Yeah.
test it. Then I put
Yeah.
them there, I try it, it works or not works is the next stage. So imagination
Exactly.
is also very important. And from what I observed, maybe I'm not fully right, but from what I've observed, a lot of younger people are so distracted by the looks because of social media
Yeah.
that it, they become sort of what the viewer would like to see. I'm sure you have also seen this. I've seen a lot of
Yeah.
people who are so obsessed with the angle of their face in a photo
Yeah.
that they look, even if everybody is looking there, they turn their head this way to say that, no, no, I have to look like this in the photo. And that you see a lot on social media with video clips people make, like they are playing something, performing something. And it has become so rare that people record themselves real, not a playback.
Hmm.
Really, they just play, sing, whatever, and they just put a video there. They want it to look
Hmm.
nice.
Yeah.
They first record, and then they go to a nice location with lighting and whatnot, and they lip sync it or such things. And I think these are not bad, but if it becomes us, then we
Hmm.
lose the inner world.
Yeah.
There's a
No
line in that.
individualism at all.
Yes. I mean, you have to
Yeah.
have your own taste. If you allow
Mm.
the others dictate you, then you gradually lose your own world. You don't come up with
Mm.
your own uh, motivations and ideas and imagination, in my opinion.
Hmm. Yeah. So the concept of putting the effort, first of all, being true to ourselves, and maybe not to have a complex. Many people have a complex, and then when they work, everything fails. They should be also brave enough to validate and falsify their work, isn't it? This is a lot
Definitely.
of work, actually. It's not easy, but it's up to us, isn't it?
Absolutely. That is the most difficult part, the one you added.
Yeah,
To become your own critic
yeah,
is the highest skill, in my opinion. You need to have
yeah,
both as a person and then as an artist.
yeah. And I mentioned that because you mentioned that there are ready-made models,
Right.
like the picture or the
Yeah.
sound of the instrument or the pieces that are commonly played. Or, I mean, these are ready-made models. These are not our choices. Are we true to ourselves if we are doing others' choices?
Absolutely. No, we are not.
Yeah.
I think we're not. I think that mm, the type of the world that these uh, internet stuff like social media and the others have created, especially for the younger generation. I mean, we didn't grow up with them. The
Yeah.
younger generation is growing up with them, with all these games and so on. That has created a different imaging of self.
Hmm.
I can't, it needs an expert in psychology and in those fields. I mean, somebody who has really studied and researched on these children. But
Hmm.
what I see from them is that they are easily lost,
Hmm.
lost in the game. They might be very
Hmm.
skillful to do these games. I mean, well, I'm talking about
Yeah.
computer games now. But doing the computer games fast and skillfully doesn't mean that you can reflect. It's
Yeah.
just working
It's
on reactions to this and that to reach the goal in the game and so on. I personally don't think that is a good training for a creative person. But I'm not an expert. I mean, somebody with some
maybe I rephrase it
expertise
if you
should
allow me. If you allow me, I
please do.
rephrase it. There are too many
Please do.
skills. in the world. And if we are good at sound
Yeah.
engineering, for example, it doesn't mean we are musicians, but we can be excellent in both. So, how much effort
Yes.
you put, how much attention, how much focus, you know what you are doing and what's the objective, right? And
Hmm.
or just following a model that was tailored for you, that's the case we are talking about. Yeah,
Right. So that's
yeah.
something else actually can be added to this.
Mm,
It's not exactly the same topic, but
mm,
uh, if there is an expression, it comes from a piece of poetry in classical literature, Persian classical literature, as کوزه همان برون تراود که در اوست. They say from pot, piece
mm,
of pottery, I mean, کوزه has another, from a jar,
mm.
the content that is inside can come out.
Yes.
That was the old thinking. Like, you can't expect something coming from a person which is not inside that person.
Yeah.
So you have to
Yes.
have something in you, and that, I mean, if let's say if I'm angry and I want to sound kind
Mm,
and calm, I have to really be a very good actress to
mm,
hide the anger and then play the other one. People might take
yeah.
this also as a skill, but in the world of creation, at least I have to have had the experience of kind and calm state
Mm,
to be
yeah.
able to play it, even to act it. Even if I
Mm,
don't have that and I'm always angry, or I haven't even experienced what kindness is, how can I get that message? How can I perform kindness in my message, in my
mhm,
medium? So I think it all boils down to what we are, who we are inside, what content we have inside ourselves. We can learn all the skills on the, I mean, all the technique or whatever, and all the information, let's call it knowledge for now, about what is this and that, what form, what rhythm, what maya, what maqam, whatever. But what is inside? If there isn't anything inside to reflect, then how can I use all those? It's all
yeah.
outside me. So I think, back to the subject, we need to either see ourselves as only technicians,
Mhm. Crafters.
which means somebody else gives us the content and we are just skillful enough to deliver that to the stage or recording or whatever. Or
Mhm,
if we want to create it, really create something from ourselves, us in inner world of ours is involved.
mhm. Yeah.
So
Interesting.
we have to have the experience. We have to have experienced an expanded human being
Yeah.
experience of life, of death, of love, loss, you name it. I mean,
Yeah.
there are human feelings in the world that humans have been dealing with since the dawn of humanity, right? And they are still
Yeah.
there. These themes are there because it's our position in the world,
Yeah.
or reflections of the world in us, whatever you want, where you want to see it. And if we disconnect ourselves from them
Mhm.
because the world outside is trying to superficially make us busy with superficially nice looking stuff, then
Yeah.
what do we have to express?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Dr.
I got
Nagar,
off again, sorry.
no, I mean, just to mention the poetry line you mentioned, we have it in Arabic. I'll just say it for those Arabs. وكل
Please.
إناء بالذي فيه ينضح. So it's the same thing like that jar thing.
Mhm.
And it's really insightful. I really enjoyed the discussion. It is really a very coherent discussion. That's something we learn from, and I think many people can learn from this, and maybe can be different in opinion.
Yeah, that would be
as
lovely.
if they see other things work for them. But I will ask you about how can people reach out to you for
Um,
lessons, for
there is my website.
collaboration. Mm,
I have my website, negarbouban.com,
mhm.
and they can easily go to my contact form and write to me. I will receive the messages there. That would be the
Interesting.
easiest.
And you are
Uh,
available in social media and right,
on Instagram, I have an account, also on
mm,
Facebook, but in the moment, I'm not uh,
active.
active in the sense that my accessibility is closed. I mean, Meta wants to either have some money or consent from my side to use my info for ads. And I
Ah,
haven't accepted any of the two options. So for now, I don't have access to my accounts on Facebook.
okay, so people can reach out to you for collaboration for online lessons or
The
whatever.
best way would be to go
Mm,
to my website and the contact page there. If they write,
excellent,
I will certainly receive it as an email.
excellent. Dr. Nagar, let's pick one more piece of yours and maybe share it. And before we
Happily.
conclude, I need to maybe hear conclusion on this interview.
I very much enjoyed this talk, especially because the topic is something that I've been thinking about a lot in the last
Mm,
years, more than before. And I guess many other musicians might consciously or unconsciously also feel this question or this type of questions more pressing in the last years. The
mhm.
question of what are we doing as as musicians in this world today?
Yeah.
Uh, that was somehow maybe related to not just to the world of music and arts, but also the state of people in the world in the last years. Things have
Mm,
changed so dramatically in less than 10 years, almost everywhere in the world. I mean,
yeah.
the versions are different from country to country, maybe from area to area, but the dramatic change in the life of people and in the life inside each and every single individual regarding meanings of life, meanings of relationships with other people.
Mhm,
They have really changed. I mean, this will take some more years probably for those who study sociology, psychology, and such things to put it together in some hypothesis and then make it
mm,
official. But what we all feel is there, then that there
mhm,
is a big change. And under that, of course, I think many musicians are also asking themselves, what are we really doing?
mhm,
Parallel to this, I think a lot of people are, one way or another, struggling with survival. I don't mean necessarily survival in the material sense. Many
yes.
people might be fine, well provided, they have a shelter, they have food to eat and whatnot, but survival in the sense of seeing a future, like
Mhm,
what I'm doing today, will it make it to the next year?
mhm,
And I think that the most fragile ones are artists.
mhm.
Like they don't really know if they will survive artistically.
Yeah.
The piece that I want to suggest that we listen to with the audience is a response to that. And
Mm,
it was again made as a response to this process of doubt in
mm,
a it's not just about musicians, of course, it's about some people who are feeling the same pressure of something trying to wipe them out, let's say.
mhm. Yeah.
Or as a joke, I was telling friends a while ago that I feel like a creature getting extinct. And
Yeah.
that feeling of danger, of extinction, it can be shared with many other people. I mean, one way or another, you name it.
Yeah.
And then I came to a piece of poetry by Hossein Monzavi, a very well-respected and popular poet in Persian poetry, which has only 5 lines, I guess, 4 or 5 lines. I first recite the Persian, and then there's a translation by a friend and a very well translator done to English. I will recite that too. It's picturing exactly the state of someone who is challenged by some forces, which is strong, but in the opinion of the writer, it's also fakely strong.
Yeah.
And then in the end, it finishes with the line "mimanam," meaning I will stay. So the poetry goes as ساده‌لوحانند که فانوس آبی را از نسیم میترسانند. خون میسوزانم و شعله میکشم میمانم. The translation, it's done by Leila Rasuli. Solely simpletons seek to affright a floating lantern of a gentle zephyr, like a breeze. Blood I burn and I blaze, alive I will remain. So this is my response to this state of doubt, if we as hopefully as artists will survive.
Yeah, we'll
The name
survive.
of the piece is Lantern.
Yes, we'll enjoy it and listen to it. And before that, I would like to thank you again, Dr. Nagar, for giving us the opportunity to meet in Alnadi once more, and we'll meet again for sure.
Thanks to you, first of all, and thanks to the
Yeah.
audience if they have survived the whole talk to this point. And it really is important to share, although it looks like, as I said, a jungle of stuff on the internet, but
Yeah.
it's really good to share, and it's a lot more important to have feedback. I hope people get to that, to feel like giving us some feedback.
Yeah. Thank you very much, all, and see you again. Thanks, Dr. Nagar.